Welcome into another episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. I am Will Thomas, and we are continuing down the final stretch of our season prediction and schedule breakdown series. And today we have the Ole Miss Rebels. So the Rebels have been in headlines really since all of last November for a lot of reasons, but a lot of it was off the field. It was the Lane Kiffin saga, and then the stuff with Luke Farrelly in the transfer portal. But now the Rebels under Pete Golding, they're just kind of locked in and ready to go. They have a chip on their shoulder this fall after making it to the semifinals last year, just falling short to Miami, losing their coach, obviously, who moved on to go try and compete for championships at a better school, at least in his opinion. So Ole Miss has a lot to play for this year. And they've got a schedule in front of them that has, a combination of really good winnable games, but also some really challenging ones that'll either hand them losses or help to forge them into another title contending team. But let's just go right through it. Let's get through all 12 of these games and look at what Ole Miss might be when we get past Thanksgiving of this fall. So in week one, they start off with Louisville. They're coming here to Nashville, right where I am, and they're playing Louisville in a neutral site game. Now, the Cardinals are definitely the less talented team. And Ole Miss is favored by something already in this game. Let me look this up right now while I'm recording. This game is not going to just be a roll over and die situation for Louisville. Like, they're going to come out and they're going to play because now they're punching up at Ole Miss. Like, they're going to give them everything they have. It's week one. You don't really know what to expect. Ole Miss is going to have their hands full of this one. They're 6.5-point favorites are the Rebels, so it's not going to be a blowout by any means. And Ole Miss is going to have to be ready. And my biggest question about Ole Miss, which I'm probably going to bring up multiple times in this video, is just like, I'm not worried about their offense. With obviously Trinidad, Kiwan, they brought in 2 Syracuse receivers. It's a really talented personnel group. But with losing Lane and Charlie Weiss, even if it's not bad, and I'm not saying it's going to be bad, law of averages is telling me that the play calling and the scheme is just not going to be as good as last year. That does not mean it's not going to be good. It does not mean it's not going to be effective. But just until I see it happen, and I'd be shocked if it does, I believe that Lane and Weiss are going to be better at running this offense than how it's going to be run this year. Once again, I do not have low hopes for Ole Miss's offense at all. But in week one, what does it look like? Right, so there's a lot of questions there. But I do have Ole Miss beating Louisville regardless. And if not because of their offense, because I'm really excited about their defense. Now that Pete Golding's the head man, defense will be much more of an emphasis than it has been in the past few years. So the Rebels on defense are really going to look like an entirely different unit this fall, I believe. So give me Ole Miss to beat Louisville in week one. In week two, Ole Miss hosts Charlotte. You get it's pretty good to have a weak game here in week two, because they'll beat Charlotte obviously, but you don't need to play your A game by any means to beat the 49ers. And they probably won't be, because the week after this, in week three, is probably the game of the year in the sport when LSU comes to Oxford. You have Lane Kiffin coming back, Charlie Weiss coming back, transfers like Winston Watkins, Prince Will, Wami Allen. This is going to be the best environment in maybe the history of the sport. I don't need to talk about that. It's been covered a ton. It's still being covered. But this game is going to be an absolute party, maybe in a bad way, maybe like an aggressive way. I have Ole Miss winning this game over LSU, because I've voiced my concerns about the Tigers a little bit. I did the video on the Tigers already, but like Sam Levitt's injury worries me. Not having spring practice for your transfer quarterback when you have double-digit transfer receivers, a brand new scheme, a brand new system, and a brand new conference, that worries me. So in week three, is that offense really going to be ready to go into an environment like Oxford is going to be against a Pete Golding defense with that much talent and be able to score a good bit of points? I like LSU's defense a ton, so I do believe that they'll be able to at least contain Ole Miss. I don't think the Rebels are going to go for like 35 or 42 in this game. But I don't see a way right now that LSU is consistently moving the ball and putting up points in Oxford. So for that reason, and a lot of reasons outside of just on the field, I do have Ole Miss beating LSU in week three and getting revenge on Lane. But that's going to come at a price to me, because in week four, they go to Florida. This is the ultimate hangover game, probably ever, because there's been no home game as anticipated as Ole Miss hosting LSU. Now they have to go on the road the next week to Gainesville, to a Florida team that is full of talent, and we'll know obviously through these first 3 games how they look. But Florida will be coming home from a game at Auburn. It'll be their home conference opener, and you'll get an Ole Miss team who, regardless of result against LSU, is going to be emotionally exhausted from what that game meant. So I do have Florida beating Ole Miss, not because I think Florida's a better team than the Rebels, but this spot is just horrible. It's a horrible spot to have to go on the road after that home game against LSU for Ole Miss. So because of the spot, I've got Ole Miss falling to Florida and going 3-1 as they head into their bye week in week 5. It's a very early bye week, and I'm a little worried about this. So it's Oklahoma, Ole Miss, and Texas are 3 teams who have this week 5 bye week. And I'm worried about it just in the sense of like you have to play 8 straight games to end the season. Now there are some schools who play 8, bye then 4, but just you see it every single year. By the end of the season, teams are constantly dealing with fatigue, injuries, all that. So it doesn't really matter, if where your buy is in that point. But when your buy is that early, so then just by you get by default the wear and tear of the season, plus 8 straight games to end the year, it worries me. But we'll go through these next 8 games for Ole Miss, and we'll really tackle that right now. But in Week 6, coming off their bye, they're back on the road at Vanderbilt. I have them beating the Commodores. Jared Curtis at this point, who should be their starter for Vandy, it'll be Week 6, so he won't totally be a true freshman yet. But Ole Miss, especially if they are coming off a loss at Florida 2 weeks ago, have a bye at home to stew on it. They'll come out swinging, and Vandy just won't really be able to keep up. So I have Ole Miss beating Vanderbilt on the road in Week 6. Then in Week 7, Ole Miss finally comes home for their first home game since that LSU matchup and plays Missouri. Now, this game is interesting because Austin Simmons is Missouri's quarterback, who was the starter for the Rebels last year before he got hurt. You have Caden Lee over there on Missouri, too, at receiver. So you got some familiar faces coming back with Missouri to Oxford. It could be a bit of a revenge game, but I'll lean Ole Miss here. I think they'll get another home win here. I mean, the Tigers, I'm very excited about their offense. And obviously, Ahmad Hardy and Jamal Roberts, assuming we do have Ahmad Hardy playing football by now in the middle of the season for Missouri, they're very hard to they're impossible to stop, and they're hard enough to contain. But I just like Ole Miss to be able to put up a good bit of points here at home, and just with that environment, I believe that crowd could earn you a stop or two. So I'll take Ole Miss over Missouri in that spot. And then Week 8, they go back on the road. They go to Texas. I have a loss here. I can't project a win over Texas really for anybody, especially not in Austin, this as we get into the season, barring injuries. So I'll say that Ole Miss goes to Austin and drops their second game of the year here to Texas, and that will really put them in, back against the wall mode. Because with 3 losses with a 12-team playoff, you really can't get in, barring a conference win, and this will be their second SEC loss. So, if you lose another game, it will be a third SEC game. You're not getting to Atlanta to get the auto bid. So, with 2 losses after this Week 8 game at Texas, Ole Miss quickly gets into, emergency win mode. We can't afford to lose a game. And so they come back from Austin off that loss, and they host Auburn. That'll be a win for a lot of reasons because, they're the more talented team. I like Pete Golding over Alex Golish in the coaching matchup a lot right now. And like I said, if they're back against the wall, they're just not going to lose this game at home immediately coming off their second loss. So they'll beat Auburn in Week 9, and then in Week 10, they get to host Georgia. And this is where I think you'll really see that, we cannot afford to lose mentality really kick in. Even though Georgia will be coming after them for revenge from the Sugar Bowl last year, you're in Oxford. You really have that defense established, and at this point, we'll know exactly what their offense looks like, or more appropriately, maybe their offense will know exactly how they need to run. So almost will be totally comfortable and know that they can't afford to lose this game. They get a home matchup against what should be a top 10 Georgia team. I have them beating the Bulldogs as well here at home to move to 7-2 as they head to Week 11 when they go to Oklahoma. Now, if you remember, Ole Miss went to Norman last year, really when all this Lane stuff started, the rumors about him leaving, and they won that game in Norman. It was a really good game, a really impressive win. I have Oklahoma beating them this year, though, because I think that Oklahoma's defense is better than it was last year. And I believe that their offense has a higher ceiling than it did last year. And this will be a big-time game for the Sooners at home. Like I said, revenge spot against Ole Miss at home, who beat you last year. They'll be in win-now mode, obviously, too. So I got Oklahoma taking down Ole Miss, handing them their third loss in Week 11. And then Week 12, they'll get to come home and play Wofford. That'll be a win ahead of the Egg Bowl. And then in Week 13, Thanksgiving weekend, you get Mississippi State. You get them at home. I have them beating the Bulldogs there in rivalry week to cap off their year at 9-3. Now, this Ole Miss team is good enough to make the playoff. Me saying that they're going to go 9-3 does not mean that I don't think they can make the playoff, because they totally can. But just going through their schedule, going through those 3 spots where I have them losing, which is at Oklahoma, at Texas, and at Florida. They're all true road games. I don't think they lose at home this year. And, the Florida game obviously could flip. I just really think that that spot is impossible. It's impossible to go win a game on the road after beating LSU at home, barring Florida collapsing. The Texas game, I think Texas is just too good. The Oklahoma game is probably the one that could flip, because if the Sooners' offense, their ceiling will be higher, but if they're not totally, stall-proof, which is very possible, you could see that happen again next year and Ole Miss is able to win a low-scoring game behind their defense. But for right now, I've got the Rebels going 9-3 in Golding's first year, which, Ole Miss fans will be disappointed at not making the playoff. But in a year where you win 9 games, let's say I did everything right here, which I know I didn't. But in a year where you win 9 games, you beat Lane and LSU, you have another win over Georgia and Kirby Smart. Even though you missed the playoff, you're able to look at that season in Golding's first ever year as a head coach and say, we're good. Like this is a good positive step still. Even though it's not as much as you did last year, you have to recalibrate and still understand like you're going through a coaching change. It's not a traditional one, doesn't necessarily feel like it, but you are going through a coaching change. And you have Deuce Knight sitting there at quarterback for next year. And you know that if you win 9 more games this year, you show what Oxford can be like, you will be able to get good enough players to come in. So I think that Ole Miss goes 9-3 this year, but it might be viewed as a bit of a disappointment, but it really shouldn't be because of all these circumstances that are around this team. So that'll do it for this episode, this Ole Miss season preview and schedule breakdown. If you have been enjoying all this football preview content and you want SEC preview stuff every single day leading up to the season, subscribe to me here and follow me on Twitter. I'm doing daily content until we kick off in August. So thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. I've been Will Thomas, and I will see you next time.